Good morning. There were some riots took place in Atlanta, and I think that it fits within the greater discussion of, um, where the Black Lives Matter movement has taken us as a society, and how, in my opinion, it's really, like Charleston White has said, it's turned into really a celebration of criminals, and really it's a movement to weaken law enforcement and to weaken basic law enforcement stuff. Um, this isn't about people to get charged on false charges. This isn't about things of that nature. This is really turned into a it's turned into a situation where cops can't do anything now. So if you're not aware, there's a uh, there's a movement to use land. There's understanding they already had to create like a large uh, training center for law enforcement. They're gonna call it cops. They call it Cop City. It's protesters call it Cop City, and been protests about them cutting down land, cutting down trees. From what I understand, though, the trees are they've had samples done of them. There's nothing special about those trees. Um, People are resisting the police or whatever. There was a movement to clear land by a lot of police, and they went out there. One of the individuals, one of the young men, had a gun. His name was Manuel Turan. He had a Smith and Wesson M&P Shield 9mm, and he shot a state trooper, and the cops killed him. The trooper survived. Um, this was on January the 18th, so it was last week. And as I understand, this weekend, I believe it was Saturday, where there was some violent protests took place, and they burned a police car. When I first heard about the trooper getting shot, and I understood there was no body cam footage of it, my first thought was that we should wait. This might be a legit shoot, and I realize now the people that were talking about how this is about, um, this is a protest against what they're doing, and this is just the cops shoot themselves or they set them up, they shoot each other. Didn't make sense to me because it wasn't a situation where it'd be that. This situation where they're clearing out woods, so it wouldn't make sense for one of them to shoot each other. That wouldn't make sense. And I think the guy had some other charges on his record. He already had a little violent stuff on his record or whatever. Um, it, so they found out, as I understand, this was on the 20th, so this would have been Friday. GBI, they said that forensic analysis confirmed a bullet removed from the trooper's wound matched the gun that Turan had. I remember hearing that there was no gun found, which is not true. Um, I'm starting to believe people like Sean White and others, they really are agitprops for the left, and they really are just people that want to rile up shit and want to start shit, and that's a shame that this is where the Black Lives Matter movement has taken us to where, and I told people this before, the protest, it isn't about going after law enforcement that acts improperly or law enforcement that does wrong. It's about going after law enforcement whenever they do anything, questioning them, not believing in their basic authority as law enforcement officers, and just basically not cooperating with them, which leads to force, which is then questioned. So then cops don't do anything. They don't do their jobs, and then saying they don't do their jobs to be defunded when you're basically like undermining the very basis of what they do. I listen to Sputnik. I don't listen to as much as I used to. And, you'll say, well, we're at war with Russia. Why are you listening to that? Sputnik has had guys on and talk about George Soros. George Soros, is a leftist, Open Societies Foundation. People have said that he funds revolutionary groups to undermine states. And I remember when I was doing Flatbed, back in 2020, I remember hearing him, guys on there talking about how even though he's doing leftist stuff, he's helping leftist people, we should understand that, he's using these groups not for liberation, not to make a better society. He's using them to foment violence and to foment unrest, and we shouldn't want that. We on the left, I shouldn't ride with you just because you're giving me money. If you're making society unstable, you're a bad actor. That should be understood. No matter who you are, what color, sexual orientation you are, you shouldn't be rocking with people that are going to make society unstable. Because I keep saying, I fear a law and order backlash. Now the good thing is Republicans are too stupid. The George Santos thing and the stuff Marjorie Taylor Greene says every day, and these shootings. There was a mass shooting in California, a bunch of Chinese people, and the shootings of these power substations. This stuff shows everybody that we have a problem with domestic terrorism. Period. Period. So Republicans are too stupid. But in a reasonable society, if Republicans had a brain cell, one brain cell, they could use stuff like this to say, look at these blacks. Look at them. They're violent. That's their nature, is to take the violence. And we can't reason with them. And they are undermining, they are attacking the very bedrock of law enforcement, which is the bedrock of our democracy. And they would use that. That's what you would do. It's like with Trump and Biden. Biden just stayed in the basement and he let Trump make a ass behind himself, and it worked. Democrats funding far right people like this guy Mastriano up here in Pennsylvania, giving him money, letting him run his mouth, and letting him lose. What I call letting the shit rise to the top. You see, something that in a reasonable society people would be like, I don't like Nazis. I don't want this. I don't like this guy is literally telling people if he gets elected, and there's a question of like the next president, like Trump or something, being impeached. He's literally saying that I am not going to follow formal rules. I am going to muck it up. In a reasonable society, people would say, then I don't want you in office. I just like I said, I just feel like this thing in Atlanta is really emblematic of a society that's really unstable. Not just on the right, but on the left too. I talk about the right being unstable. Civil war on the right with different figures fighting amongst themselves, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert fighting in the restroom and things. I talk about those kind of things. We should talk about this too, because it's important. It's also amazing to me how normal this is. This major riot happened, and I didn't hear about it anywhere else. They had bombs on their bodies. People that had bombs in these riots. They weren't just tearing stuff and stealing. Now, in a reasonable society also, people would recognize this as criminal organization, because they've already shown you that the bullet from the man's gun was in the trooper's body. That should be the end of it. That's how I go. That is conclusive evidence. That's beyond a reasonable doubt. If he wasn't murdered, he'd be facing second-degree murder right now. I mean, if he wasn't killed, he'd be facing second-degree murder right now, without a doubt. Possibly first. I think that this goes into what right-wingers say, which is that why would anybody want to be a cop in a major city? This is an example of why. When they had riots in Charlotte years ago and nobody wanted to come. Nobody from outside wanted to come because they're like, can't do our jobs. We can't act. We got to have 6 guys on one man. I see people say like, you can't fight that guy one. You got to use a taser. Because if they do that, if they use their training, if they go one-on-one, they hurt them, you're going to riot. This isn't about your manhood or your strength. This is about you protecting your career. We had a situation where a black woman was stabbing another black woman, the cop shot her, and you had black leaders talking about how he shouldn't have done that and that he should have stood by. She had a knife, she turned to him, and he shot us in Texas. I'm sorry. I think the black community's got a problem. And the problem is not law enforcement. I've said it before that my fear with Black Lives was that this would be either taken over by or already run by people that really want to just dismantle law enforcement and want to make it to where the police can't do anything. And I think we're there now. I think as of January 2023, we're there. We're there. If a man pulls a gun and you can't shoot him in self-defense after he shot you. People can't do that. Then I think we've got a real problem. You can disagree with the cop city. You can disagree with, all this stuff. You can disagree with what the city or the state is doing. But if you're trying to crucify cops doing their job and defending themselves, then I've got to say what you're doing is you're breaking down society. You're making society unstable, and these are terroristic activities. I would say some of this stuff too. When I started following this black stuff, and this is year of the pandemic, COVID 2020, before I came up here, and I started following Majority Report was talking about how can we get more body cams, how can we how can we change the culture of these agencies that are so resistant to change, and they were talking about federal grants and things of that nature. That's okay. That's something to discuss, but where we've gone to now is actually waging a war on law enforcement. We wanted more training for law enforcement. That was the discussion. That's what the 21st century policing was all about when Obama came. That's what that was about. We need more training. And Cop City is a step towards that, clearly. And for you to go out with a gun and try to stop cops and then get shot and then people riot, it makes me wonder, what does Black Lives Matter want? What do these movements really believe in? And that some of this stuff really is it's terrorism, striking at the very bedrock of the stability of our society, the social fabric of our societies. That we're gonna go out here and we're gonna kill cops, and we're gonna use violence to forward our means and to pervert, to resist, to obstruct government operations. I think that's it's a little scary. And I think as of January 2023, we're there now. Thanks for listening.